Ehren here, question period Canada. How y'all doing? Pretty gorgeous day in Nova Scotia. I know it's cold across the country, so some people are still having a tough job staying warm. It's getting easier day by day here in Nova Scotia. I'd like to greet everybody. We have our one of our moderators, Kirk, is with us here on main screen. You can say hello, Kirk, if you'd like.
Hello.
Hello,
everybody today.
And so that's Kirk, everybody. That's one of the folks that like to greet you. Sheila and I and Kirk try to say hello to everybody every chance we get. If you ever slip through, you can just say, hey, I didn't get my shout out. We'll get you a shout out. We'll hook you up. We're pretty excited today. We have a long list of very fun videos, I think, to watch. So you gotta kill your audio, Kirk. You got to kill your audio, Kirk. That's coming through. That's why you need the headset. So, anyways, guys, we're going to jump right into this. We do have some very fun videos to get things kicked off. Let's jump right into it. Let's go.
Canadians want change. They want real change.
Higher interest rates, climbing household debt, rising housing costs.
The interest rate cut just happened about a half hour ago, down to 0.5%.
What we were elected on was a commitment to help Canadians grow the economy.
The Bank of Canada has decided to continue holding its key rate steady at 5% as signs of a slowing economy persist.
The policy rate of 5% remains appropriate. It's still too early to consider lowering the policy interest rate.
The CPI for January shows inflation at its lowest level in 14 months. Seasonally adjusted compared to last month, prices are down 0.2%.
What's up, Calamaru? How are you doing? Mr. Pickles, good day. Patty, always a pleasure.
We're not going to do things that will further contribute to the Bank of Canada's need to fight inflation.
Bound, what's up? Sheila,
the
always,
bank says,
what's
quote,
up?
Monetary policy
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
was not sufficiently restrictive to bring supply and demand back into balance and return inflation sustainably to the 2% target.
Inflation aggravation, a skyrocketing rate not seen in nearly 4 decades.
Inflation numbers for August show prices were even higher than economists expected.
That's why I'm committed to address the challenges that Canadians are facing around home ownership.
More than 3/4 say owning a home in Canada is now only for the rich. 71% of renters have given up on ever owning a home. This is what $1 million gets you in Toronto and in the greater Vancouver area.
Rent sucks. Mortgage renegotiation. Oh my God, how are we going to deal with it? Like, these are real fears.
Sprawling tent cities where people are desperately clinging to life. They're calling them Trudeau towns.
It's not normal for people to be living in tents outside.
The federal housing advocate calls it a life or death crisis. Crime dropped in this country in almost every region. Last year, the homicide rate for 2012 was reported to be the lowest in 46 years.
We will articulate into policies something that is important for all Canadians. That is to keep us safe from gun violence. We are actually changing mindsets and shaping a culture that gives zero tolerance to violence against women.
Here is a frightening statistic. A girl or woman is killed every 48 hours in this country.
Police in Canada reported nearly 14,000 firearm-related violent crimes in 2022. New data from Statistics Canada shows the rate of this crime is nearly 10% higher than 2021.
Auto theft is up by 24%. Break and enters, minor thefts, and shoplifting are
We're
also
seeing an uptick in violent
The murder rate. It is up for a 4th straight year by 10%.
Cryptomeria, Mr. G, how are you guys?
Daily Bread Food Bank today.
What's up?
What was the thing that shocked you the most? I know you've talked about this issue a lot in the House of Commons, but what shocked you the most as you did the actual tour?
One statistic. This food bank feeds 1 in 10 Torontonians. It's just, let that sink in. 1 in 10 Torontonians.
What's up, Blue? How are you?
Eats at this food bank. There's been a 6-fold increase in food bank demand for this one food bank. Like, unbelievable. It's a 500% increase. We have half of Canadians eating less than they should. A fourth of school children going to school malnourished.
What's up, Katie girl?
This is the miserable life that people are living after 9 years of inflationary debt and spending by the Trudeau government that has destroyed purchasing power, taken people's money, punished their work, and doubled their housing costs.
The government brought out their budget this week, and they would say that we're making life more affordable. I look at the cost of everything going up, and I think that has to be wiping out all of these gains that they say they're making for people.
What gains? What gains? You know, for example, there's a lot of beautiful slogans, like a school food program. Only problem is there's no food. They don't provide any food. They promised this program 3 years ago. There's not a single ham sandwich that has been served at any school anywhere in Canada. There's been a lot of bureaucracy created and money spent, but at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. And we have more people at food banks than ever before. In fact, the food banks are literally running out of food, so that some people are joining Facebook groups to learn tricks on how to eat food out of a garbage can. The Dumpster Diving Network, look it up on Facebook, 8,000 members now. This is the kind of horror story that we never imagined possible before Justin Trudeau. But when you tax the farmers who make the food and the truckers who ship the food, you tax all who buy the food, and people can't afford to buy it anymore.
So what do you do to fix that? You've got a budget deficit that has become structural. Yep. It is inflation going up. The Bank of Canada interest rates are not coming down. All of those things make it not just more difficult for Canadian families, but for the government to pay the bills as well. So how do you deal with that? How do you make life better for Canadians, make life more affordable?
Well, the good news is that life wasn't like this before 9 years of Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone. We're going to axe the carbon tax to lower the cost of the farmers who produce the food, the truckers who ship the food, and the local grocers who sell us our food, so we can have more affordable food. We're going to cut income tax so that working people bring home more of each dollar they earn, and they can afford food.
Oh, cut income tax? I hadn't heard that before.
Oh, I've said it many times. We will be cutting income
Etienne,
tax.
how are you?
We have to, because the working poor can't afford to pay their bills because they lose so much. You make it, and Trudeau takes it. We have to cut taxes to reward hard work. We're going to cap government spending and cut waste to bring down deficits, interest rates, and inflation. And we're going to require municipalities get out of the way so builders can build homes people can afford by making it a requirement that cities permit 15% more home building per year as a condition of getting federal funds. And that way we can build the homes that make it affordable. It's hard to believe, but 9 years ago, when I was housing minister, the average rent was $973 a month. That was not even a decade ago. So we've proven we can make housing affordable. We've got to build the homes to do it.
Do you feel like the Trudeau Liberals, after saying you had no housing plan for so long, after mocking what you were putting forward, they're stealing it now? I mean, they announced, we'll release federal lands, federal buildings for homes. Is that a compliment, or how do you see it?
Well, if they were actually going to do it, I'd be happy. But what they've done is they've taken all of my ideas and they've promised that at some point in the future they will do them. But the reality is they're big on talk, short on execution. As Elvis Presley might say, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. Since Sean Fraser took over as housing minister, after he ruined the immigration system, home building's gone down. This month, housing starts are down. Next month they'll be down again. The month after that they will be down according to his own housing agency. So the problem is that we've got an incompetent, costly, bureaucratic Trudeau government that stands in the way. We need to get them out of the way so that we can build the homes.
You mentioned Sean Fraser. It shocks me that the Liberals broke Canadians' trust in the immigration system. They broke the consensus. I live near a food bank at a church where their recent immigrants are showing up lining up all morning, every Wednesday, to go to a food bank because they arrived in Canada. Housing's too much, food's too much. Do we need to get things under control? I mean, even the Prime Minister's now saying, we're bringing in people faster than we could absorb. And I think, okay, well, maybe don't do that.
If only he knew somebody who could have done something different.
maybe not do that. So do we have to deal with 900,000 to 1 million temporary residents coming in each year?
This is the legacy of Sean Fraser. He's the guy that unleashed chaos in temporary immigration. He made it run out of control. And that's not my words, that's the Prime Minister's words. But the puzzling part is, okay, you have a minister who totally ruined the immigration system. The logical thing to do is fire him, put him on the back bench, and then ask him not to run again in the next election. But instead he puts him in charge of housing. No wonder housing costs have doubled after 8 years of Trudeau. And another reason just to fire the whole government in a carbon tax election so that we can elect a new common sense government to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime.
All right, Pierre, thanks very much.
Great to be with you, Brian. Thank you. To have
Before we jump into the next piece, guys, I'm just going to do a quick experiment and see if Kirk can comment. Can you hear me, Kirk?
Yeah, I can hear you.
And I can hear you. So how's it going so far? A couple of fun videos. We've got way more. So we're going to watch some more videos, guys. Again, Kirk and I are trying something different here with more interaction. We don't want to disrupt the videos, but we're going back to the videos now. And so Kirk and I are just going to watch along with you guys because we're all just learning about Canadian federal politics right here. Here we go. We're back in
total control over what you can see and say online to protect us all from these dangerous forces that might influence our thinking if we're not protected by the angels in the government. And yet, when there is actually a risk of manipulation by hostile and malicious actors like, say, a communist regime in Beijing, he can't even take the responsibility of reading his briefing notes.
First of all, these are briefing notes that I never saw. These are briefings for a briefer who then gave a briefing.
This is the irony, the great irony of his leadership, and one of the reasons why I think he's succeeded in doubling housing costs, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years, sending 2 million people to the food banks, 8,000 people signing up for a Facebook group called the Dumpster Diving Network because they now have to eat out of a garbage can after he drove food prices rising with his carbon tax. He wants to control every aspect of your life, and then when he ruins your life, he wants to take none of the responsibility for the ruin that he caused.
What's up, Dorothy? What's up, Tyrone?
After 8 years of Trudeau, housing costs have doubled.
For everybody?
Rent has doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, down payments have all doubled. It has been double trouble. Let's look at how insane it is in Canada today.
Insane.
Right now, housing costs are 25 to 45% more expensive than south of the border, even though the Americans have 8 times the population and a smaller landmass to live on. So they have less natural supply and 8 times the natural demand, and yet their prices are far more affordable. You can buy a home for less than half the price on the American side of Niagara Falls than on the Canadian side, even though they are only 15 minutes apart. Vancouver is now the 3rd most expensive housing market in the world, comparing median income to median housing prices. UBS found in 2022 Toronto was the worst housing bubble on planet Earth. Both of them more expensive than New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, London, England, and even Singapore. An island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canadians.
We have the most mortgage debt by far of any G7 country as a share of our GDP. What is most astounding about this is that we actually spend far more on residential investment than any other country in the OECD. Residential investment in Canada is 9% of our economy. The OECD average is 4%. In other words, as a relative share of our economy, we are spending twice as much as the rest of our competitor countries to build fewer homes. We have the fewest homes per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have by far the most land and we spend by far the most money building homes. How is this possible? How is this possible?
Bad management.
We have more land, labor, and lumber than anyone, and yet we can't build homes. The answer is government is standing in the way. What is the #1 cost to building a new home in Vancouver today? Land, labor, lumber, permits. Government represents 60% of the cost of a newly built home in Vancouver today. 60%. So 40% is what you use to pay for the worker, for all the lumber and the drywall and the land. This is insane. Now, we've had wonderful collaboration between all levels of government on housing. I want to say it's been very beautiful to see how well they've collaborated. There have been beautiful press conferences. They've pat each other on the backs. They've congratulated each other for the amazing job they're doing. And guess what? They're spending more money on housing than ever before. This, we're told, is an achievement. We should not worry about the cost to the person buying the home. We should celebrate that it's even more costly to pay for the programs that created the mess in the first place, we're told. Well, I think that we've been too polite for too long, the politicians who caused this mess. My common sense plan is to use the federal spending power in order to get the local bureaucracies that block housing construction out of the way. % of folks who don't yet own a home believe they never will. This would have been unimaginable 8 years ago. Unimaginable. It would have been unimaginable 8 years ago, before Justin Trudeau.
Sorry,
to think
guys.
that not only would he pass a law to control what you can see and say on the internet, but he would then put forward another law which could put you under house arrest or a peace bond under suspicion of something unacceptable you might say in the future. You know, this guy, if he had read 1984, he would have thought it was an instruction manual and not a warning.
Hello, Marie. How are you? We're just into another fun video right away. Like, bring it home, Pierre.
Mr. Speaker, do I have to answer that?
It's embarrassing.
Yes. Yes, you do. No, I am not ashamed.
Funny one.
No, I am not ashamed. No, I am not ashamed. No, I am not ashamed.
Should the provinces have more autonomy on immigration?
It's a good question.
I think that would be hard to enforce. It's hard to secure the provincial borders.
It's interesting to see what people
I
think.
think it should be the federal responsibility.
Well, I don't know how much say they have at the moment on immigration. But I think they definitely, each province should have its own input because they're all, they're all different in their own way. So,
I think they should a bit, but I still think it's the federal government that pays a lot for them. And I think that we need to have immigrations.
For sure. Break it down to the smaller systems, and, we know what works within our community and we know what doesn't work.
That's a good one, because we're a federation, so provinces should have a certain amount of say, but in having more say, that takes away from the federal power. I think it should still be a federal issue, but maybe the provincial ministers and people of the province should have more of a say of the influx of people and where they go, and not just be forced to take in whoever, wherever.
I'm going to go with yes, but it still needs to be done federally is most important. I mean, once they're here, they should be like anybody else, be able to go anywhere they want. Okay, like if you're allowed to Canada, you're in Canada, go where you want. Okay, who are we letting in though? That's the thing.
Yeah, just because of housing. There's a lot of issues with population control here right now. We don't have housing for a lot of people, so it'd be nice to have more money from the federal government to help offset that, or at least let the provinces decide on how many people we're going to bring in.
No, that should be a Canadian thing. It should be a Canadian policy. It should be global, over the whole country.
Yes, I do think that would be important because each province has their own issues when it comes to capacity for immigration. So I think that they should have certainly more say in what they bring in and their quota limits.
I guess it depends on the housing situation in each province. If there isn't much housing going around, then they should get that decision. But otherwise, it's up to the government.
It's funny the way people
see
word
more of a
themselves.
federal immigration policy, only because, looking down south at the states, you see that some rogue states, or maybe in Canada, provinces where people are just a bit extreme, and I really don't like extremism, and so I would like a broad, even immigration policy, and I totally support immigration. I think it's our savior.
I would say yes on that.
Yes, bye.
But I think they should base it on what they need to bring into the country. And there's not so much I can say about it, but we've allowed immigration here now, right? And they're all best kind of people, right? But I think they should watch what they're doing and try to focus on the main issue, which is helping out the whole country.
I don't know about that. I really believe in the importance of immigration. Lots of friends, my father came here from another country, and have lots of friends that have. I don't know though. I don't know really. It's a good question though, because every province has its own needs, and we certainly, with the declining birth rate and an aging population, we definitely need people. So, I'm sort of more in favor of provinces, I suppose, having a little bit more say in that, to meet their own needs.
I think the federal government should listen more to the provinces. Now, I don't think provinces should have final say, but they should definitely amalgamate better.
No, because a Canadian is a Canadian. It just shouldn't matter which province that they're going into. Every province should be welcoming of immigrants into their provinces.
Personally, I feel it still should remain a federal matter, yeah.
Why?
To give unification across the whole country, as far as the numbers that are allowed in every year, as far as whether it's relatives of current residents or different things that are happening in the world that are specifically attuned to through Ottawa and their people that work overseas and such, yeah.
No.
Why?
I think it should be
What's up, Larry?
standard across Canada, as long as the provinces, each province can support it. So it's not quite that easy, but I think it's a Canadian decision, federal.
Why do you feel that way?
I think the provinces, whether it's Ontario, Quebec, or Alberta, I think they should all support immigration.
I think ultimately immigration comes down to communities and whoever can better represent communities, because at the end of the day, immigrants need to arrive in communities, they need to be cared for by communities, and so the province has a better handle on what communities want than federally.
So listen, let's begin with the budget, obviously, because you have now these high-profile Canadians, a former Bank of Canada governor, 2 former Liberal finance ministers, essentially joining in on the criticism that we're hearing from the Conservative Party on this budget. How problematic is that for the government, Susan, as they try to sell this budget to Canadians?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I hope you all had a great weekend. In regards to today's video, we're going to be checking in on our favorite Liberals, CHYSTIA, FREELAND, as well as a little bit of Justin since their budget announcement last week. Now, after the announcement, FREELAND was doing some press, and one of the interviews she did was with Global News. Now, during that interview, FREELAND gave her typical non-answer answers, but she also addressed some of the criticism and critiques that she's been getting from individuals in regards to the budget. Now, I will preface that the interview is a little bit noisy since it was done in the lobby where other media was happening, but I want you to try to listen to what she says, even though I know it's painful to listen to her.
With me now is the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, CHYSTIA FREELAND. Let's start with the increase in capital gains tax. I believe you were saying it will affect 0.1% of Canadians, the very wealthy. Can you explain exactly who will pay more, who you're targeting? Is it going to include, for example, someone's elderly aunt who is thinking of selling the family cottage?
Well, let me start with who is excluded, because that is the vast majority of Canadians. More than 99% of Canadians will not pay as individuals a higher rate of capital gains, and I just want to be sure people understand that. So the most important thing, the biggest asset most Canadians own is their home. Our homes are all fully excluded from capital gains taxation. That continues to be the case. The second thing which we are bringing in is a new tier. And this tier means that the first $250,000 of a capital gain in every single year that a Canadian might enjoy is taxed at the current rate of a 50% inclusion. So you actually only pay any tax at all on 50% of it. And it's because of that really narrow focus, which is entirely intentional, that this additional tax is really focused on those at the very top, on people who can afford to pay a little bit more to make the investments that our country really needs, that especially young Canadians really need.
So I'm not exactly clear on who that is then, and you know that the business community is already saying that by doing this it's sending the wrong message for a country that has a big problem with productivity.
Now at this point, I shouldn't be that surprised that she chose to answer the question by not answering the question, which was very straightforward. Who will be affected by the capital gains tax? And instead of being honest about it, she decides to go the other way and say who isn't affected, which from a lot of the experts out there and non-experts, people are saying that that's not the case. A lot of middle-class individuals are going to be affected by this come June when it gets implemented. And from now till then, you're going to see a lot of people trying to sell off their extra assets because they don't want to get hit by this.
With regard to the capital gains tax increase, which is substantial and will not be hurting the richest of the rich, as many small business groups and journalists now, it's taken a couple of days for the dust to settle on this. They're pointing out, hey, you're really giving a sock in the jaw to a lot of small business people, entrepreneurs, artisans who, you know, they don't get a government pension. You know, they might have bought a triplex, live in one of them, rent out the other two. All of a sudden, they're going to get hit with a whopping increase in their capital gains. A 33% increase in what has to be brought into income. People are finally starting to notice that and know it's not Trudeau going after the super rich. He's going after super ordinary Canadians, and they're starting to see it.
And also just average Canadians, if you have a cottage or any property or anything like that,
Yeah.
If you want to sell, you'll be paying for that as well. Or
Exactly. And even if you give it to your kids, it's a deemed disposition, and you're still hit with the full whack of this new capital gains tax. So I don't know where Freeland got her number. She said it's 0.14. Yeah, that's pretty specific percent of Canadians who are going to be hit by this. But I guess it was some sort of number put together by the gnomes in the finance department saying, oh, well, we have this many last year, and therefore it translates to this percentage of the population. But look, Roger, I was talking yesterday to somebody who's been in real estate for 25 years. In the area where I am, there are indeed a lot of cottages and a lot of triplexes and four-unit buildings. And she was saying, look, over the next 9 weeks, it's going to be total chaos because people are going to start unloading because this new massive tax increase that Trudeau has brought in on the middle class is only going to kick in on June 25th. So people are going to be unloading properties between now and then. And who's going to be soaking up those properties? People who have lots of cash. Maybe the rich are the ones who are benefiting from Trudeau's thing. And he's still trying to sell this as him standing up to the wealthy and Poilievre defending them. Poilievre's doing nothing of the kind. He's sticking to his basic messages about the cost of living, housing, inflation, groceries, and the like. He's not taking the bait that Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland ham-fistedly try to put out there for him.
Now listen, say what you want about Tom Mulcair, love him or hate him, I get it, but he's not a finance guy. He's the former leader of the NDP, and even he can see the writing on the wall when it comes to the budget. But as Donna Friesen, the host of Global News there, pushes back on Freeland in regards to her critics, this is again what she had to say about them.
We're running out of time. I just wanted to raise one thing with you. You know, your critics say that the Liberals are good at addition, not so good at subtraction. And that right now the cost of servicing the debt in Canada is $46 billion in 2023-24. That's more than I think what is spent on the Canada Health Transfer. Your critics say spending measures on top of that are reckless. What do you say to them?
Especially Twitch.
Well, I say actually that is economically illiterate.
Now this woman is an absolute piece of work. I want you to take a look at this face right here. As she just said, her critics are economically illiterate. Yet the criticism is coming from economists, business owners, the parliamentary budget officer, the other premiers, also the former governor of the Bank of Canada, who said that this would have been the worst budget in the last 40 years, which he was right on, as well as two previous Liberal MPs who were the finance minister, one that was her predecessor, and then John Manley, who also was interviewed, and this is what he had to say.
The minister's justification for this was slightly, I'd say, misleading because the rate of tax on capital gains is lower than the rate on ordinary income. But of course, all of the rates are progressive. And once you get to ordinary income of roughly $200,000 per year, you're paying a lot more. In province of Ontario, you're paying almost 54% of your incremental income in tax. And if you look at the analysis of who's paying the tax, the more people that are earning more are paying a lot more. They're paying a lot higher rates, and they're paying a lot more money. So that's why it's very hard to go down this road of saying, well, what's fair? What's the right amount? You know, the finance minister for Louis XIV in France once said that the art of taxation was to extract the largest number of feathers from the goose with the least amount of complaint from the goose's beak. And there's a point at which, when the government becomes the senior partner in an individual's economic relationship, then you basically discourage them from working. You may encourage them to move elsewhere. They are mobile. And you end up getting less revenue, not more. So my fear in this, remember, Michael, I was in the Liberal government in the 1990s. We actually brought that inclusion rate back down to 50% from 66 2/3%. The reason was it wasn't raising much money. And I think if you go back to the numbers, you'll see that at 50%, it actually raised more money than it did at 66 2/3%. Why? Because people would just sit on their assets. Why sell it? The government's going to take too much. And that's not the kind of intervention in the economy that's healthy. So I think it's a mistake.
You know, quickly running out of time, but I do want to ask you, in the less than 1 minute I have, you know, the inclusion rate on capital gains is one thing. The other criticism this government is facing is the fact that it's laid out no path to balance. Does that still matter, do you think?
Oh, I think it matters. And I'll give you just two numbers since we're short on time. One is government spending has doubled compared to the last year of the Harper government. And not only that, the carrying charges on our debt have also doubled, so that we're now paying as much interest on debt as the government is generating from GST revenue. Those are both worrying things because eventually the piper calls the tune and you will have to make some cuts. That's what we went through in the 90s. It was unpleasant and it was difficult. Canadians largely supported it, but you don't want to get to that.
Yeah, the way this government is going, that's what it's going to come down to, especially when we have Justin Trudeau coming out and saying stuff like this when all the premiers, all 13, have reached out and said that this is a terrible budget.
In a recent letter, all 13 premiers accuse Ottawa of encroaching on their jurisdiction, with plans to spend billions more on housing, pharmacare, and a new dental program. Trudeau says he's only spending more because premiers aren't doing enough.
I'd always rather work with provinces, but if we have to, I will go around them and be there for Canadians.
And there you have it, folks. Straight from our fearless leader himself, the dictator. Because who cares about democracy, right? 13 out of 13 premiers reach out to you? Who cares? Majority of Canadians are the ones that are going to suffer? Who cares? Justin Trudeau will do what he wants to do. He'll circumvent however which way he wants because he knows best, right? As he said from the very start of this whole campaign.
Sunny ways, my friends. Sunny ways.
But hey, this is just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this.
All right, guys. So we're into the next video.
Resuming debate. Resuming debate. Resuming debate.
I should tee this one up. This is a couple of our favorites. This is Larry Brock and Garnet Ginu going head-to-head, discussing how they got into politics and all the... I don't know if you know about Larry Brock. He's a bit of a star on this channel. Like, somehow people are drawn in by Larry Brock and Garnet Ginu. And these guys are different ends of the spectrum, like on why people... why I like them. For completely different reasons. So it's just an interesting piece to watch them go back and forth here.
This for a number of reasons, part of which has been our intensive work on the Arrive scam scandal. And I'm very pleased to be able to be joined today as we resume our regular episodes with friend and colleague Larry Brock. Larry is kind of a rookie rock star in Parliament, newly elected in the 2021 election, and has had a stratospheric rise in terms of his parliamentary career. He is known as Larry the Prosecutor, and I've gotten to know Larry. We've been working together on the Arrive Can issue, but we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive today into kind of Larry's background as a prosecutor and how he has moved seamlessly from prosecuting criminals in court to prosecuting dubious characters in parliamentary committees. So, Larry, great to have you on for this conversation.
Thank you, Garnet. Glad to be here.
And just way out of left field here, you and I have something unique in common. I think we're the only two members of Parliament of fully or partial Maltese origin. Malta's this little island in the Mediterranean Sea, and I think a little bit of a sort of cultural stereotype of people being scrappy, right? Standing up for themselves, and this goes back to the Malta's long-running history of being of sort of strategic military importance in various wars, resisting attempted invasions. I heard stories from my grandparents about World War II and how the Axis did everything they could to take Malta, and Malta held out. So maybe we'll, if you don't mind me just starting there, if you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on your heritage and how that's shaped your identity as a person and as a member of parliament.
Great question. So I have many cultures on my mother's side and my father's side. But starting with my mother, you are absolutely correct. We are both Maltese. I'm Maltese on my mother's side. She was born in Malta to my grandmother, who was born in Alexandria, Egypt, lived her life there, met my grandfather, who was 100% Maltese in Alexandria. They got married in Alexandria and then moved to Malta. Now, so my grandmother literally could speak close to 7 languages in Alexandria, Egypt. Her mother was Greek, her father was Italian, so she could speak English, French, Italian, Greek, Egyptian, and obviously Maltese. So she carried that languages. She instilled that into her children, my mother and my aunt, and they lived quite happily for about 5 years of my mother's life in Malta. I don't know what town it was, near the capital city. And then I guess the economic circumstances were such that there wasn't an abundance of work-related activities for my grandfather. So he heard about a wonderful opportunity to move to Canada. So he went to Canada first, and after 3 months, invited the family to travel, and they decided.
And this would have been when?
This would have been back in late 40s.
Okay.
So my mother was born in 40. My mother was born in 42. So
Okay.
she was 5. So late 47, 1947, they immigrate to New York City, and from there made their way directly to Brantford, Ontario.
Okay.
My grandfather
What's up, Norm?
had
How are you?
friends and other relatives who settled in the southwestern area of Brantford, and there was a job waiting for him, of course, and that's where the family decided to live. So that's my mother's side. My father is half Irish, half Polish. So you can see a number of cultures that have
Yeah.
influenced my upbringing. Predominantly, though, they were raised as Irish farmers. My father was a farmer and grew up in the little town of Jarvis, Ontario, which is just outside of Hagersville, Simcoe area.
Okay.
And yeah, they met each other on a blind date when they were late teens, early 20s, and hit it off and decided to get married. And a year later, I arrived. A year after that, my sister arrived, and we've decided family decided to settle into to the Brantford area. And
So you've lived there your
all
whole
my
life.
entire
then?
life,
Yeah. Okay.
born and raised.
So my father's family immigrated from Malta to the GTA as well in the I think it would have been the late 50s though, so a little bit later, and kind of the other end of town, so to speak. They were in Scarborough, so some overlap there. And then so just like jumping forward, you've developed this career as a prosecutor, which is your niche in Parliament. But this was your career beforehand. You were a prosecutor in what, the same community you represent, and tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. I don't know if I ever shared this with you. I've shared it with a number of colleagues, and they get quite a kick out of hearing this story. But I don't know what it is, but at the age of 5, and I have a vague recollection of this. I know my memories of my childhood are rather spotty. As I get older, it's even more spottier. But largely for babysitting purposes, my grandmother essentially raised my sister and I while my parents were working. My grandmother lost her husband, my grandfather, literally 10 days before I was born, Garnet. And so, yeah, she was at the ripe old age of 39, a widow. She married very, very young, I guess, which was customary in that culture back in those days. My grandfather was much older. So we sort of had this unique bond literally after I was born. And she would call me her Butch, Butch, her Butch. It's a nickname that has carried with me all my life. I've actually named some of my bulldogs, my British bulldogs, Butch. But nevertheless, so she tells me at the age of 5, as she was watching me, she put on some cartoons for me back in those.
Just a quick question, guys. Do you guys not find Garnet Genu is looking a little seedy in this video compared to the way that he usually presents? Because he's young and handsome. I think he's 34, maybe 35. He looks a little seedy, do you not think? A little bit. Just curious. That might just be me.
Those days it was black and white, but I was watching cartoons. She left the room. 10 minutes later, she comes back into the room, and I've changed the channel. And lo and behold, what I was watching was an old black and white series known as Perry Mason.
Oh, I love that show.
The original was Raymond Burr, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm watching it. I'm literally in front of the television, just glued to the television set. And my grandmother says, Butch, why did you change the channel? And I looked up at her and I said, Grandma, I want to be him. Now, I didn't know what that meant at the age of 5, but I guess I really liked the courtroom drama of the show. So as I got older, the only thing I was fixated on was this whole concept of becoming a lawyer, a courtroom lawyer. As I got older and older, I realized, yeah, this is something that I could really stick my teeth into. I think I would enjoy this as a career. So really, it made my younger years really much easier in terms of my focus. I knew I had to have good grades. I knew that I had to have a well, branded sort of background. I had to get out in the community. So I was doing a lot of community level work as a teenager, but I was always fixated on getting into law school. So I get into law school, I pour my heart and soul into it, I graduate. And then I decided to settle on litigation, of course, but I wanted to broaden the litigation. So I did corporate litigation, I did small claim litigation, I did real estate, wills and estates, and of course, criminal defense, trying to mirror the inner Perry Mason in me. So I started off at a small litigation firm in Hamilton, Ontario. I became partner within a couple of years. I was quite proud of that. And within another couple of years thereafter, we decided to branch our practice into not only Hamilton but in the Brantford community. And I found that more and more time I was spending in Brantford and less time into Hamilton. So there was a mutual decision to leave the partnership, and I would completely take over Brantford operations under my own name. So that started off in 1997, and we were literally right across the street from the Brantford Courthouse. I leased a very large old insurance building and had numerous offices, really ideally set up for small practitioners to operate. So I brought in a lot of other sole practitioners, and at one point we had close to 8 lawyers working out of this small building. So then, I was working really hard. I found that there really wasn't much of a work-life balance when you're in your own business, you're self-employed. You got to be cognizant not only of meeting payroll. So I really wore a number of hats. It wasn't just being the lawyer; it was being the business owner of my practice. And it was challenging. There was days that I wasn't paying myself, but I was ensuring that I was paying my staff. As a defense lawyer, as a sole practitioner, you have some ebbs and flows in terms of your income, and you have some really good times and some really lean times. So that was a bit of a challenge, but I continued on because I just love the practice of law. I get married, and my wife, not liking one iota the lack of a work-life balance. At best, we were taking maybe 2 weeks off in a given year. She's a registered nurse. And then she just said to me, she goes, look, I don't think you're going to go anywhere in this private practice of yours. I'm seeing the stress all over your face. why don't you think about joining the Crown Attorney's office? I never really thought much about it, Garnet. I knew that there was two sides to a criminal trial, a Crown and defense. I had some great relationships with the previous crowns that I worked with. So out of a lark, I just approached one of my good Crown friends at that time in the early 2000s. And I said, look, if I was interested in joining the Crown Attorney's office, what would be the process and what would be the likelihood that I could get employed? And lo and behold, the Ministry of the Attorney General at that time in Ontario was going through a hiring phase. And literally within a week of me having that discussion, there was an opportunity for me to take on a contract, a part-time, which I thought was a part-time Crown Attorney contract. So I applied for it. Lo and behold, I was successful. But it wasn't part-time, it was full-time. So literally, the Crown manager who hired me said, I can offer you employment literally for 30 days, Larry. Would you take a leap of faith and close down your private practice that you have built up for this time, close to 9 years, put that all aside and join the Crown's office for 30 days? So you can well imagine the thought patterns going through my mind at that time and the long discussions I had with my wife. But I truly believe that there was a lot more that I could do in terms of the criminal justice aspect of things. I really, really enjoyed ensuring that my clients received a fair trial. As a defense lawyer, one of the questions I never asked, unless it was volunteered, is whether or not the client actually committed the criminal offense. Because, as a defense lawyer, it didn't matter. What mattered was to ensure that the Crown could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt and to ensure that there was a fair trial. So I decided, yes, I will take that leap of faith. And sure enough, that 30 days turned into 6 months, turned into a full-time Crown Attorney career, which started in earnest in May, I know the exact date, May the 4th, 2004. And I continued along those lines well until literally, 2 months before the general election in September of 2021. So I was the senior assistant Crown Attorney in the Brantford office at that time. Really accepted a ton of responsibility, really enjoyed the complexity of the cases that I dealt with. But it also allowed me more flexibility to become more of a pillar in my community and more of an agent for change. I was getting on board with a number of non-for-profits, getting involved in a number of charities, just really committing myself to becoming a community member. And I literally did that for close to 15 years, long before the election.
Yeah.
So that's basically the history of my
Yeah,
my legal
that's
career. Technically, I'm still a lawyer. I still pay dues to the Law Society. I still do my filings, and that'll probably
yeah.
continue for the rest of my life.
That's fascinating background, and I love the Perry Mason story, and I didn't know you had been a defense lawyer as well. So I think
Yes,
that probably helps you to kind of see it from both sides. I
it,
want to
it truly
really
does.
Yeah, I want to really kind of drill into method now, because people are watching you question witnesses in House of Commons committees. You have the rules of engagement, the standing orders of the House. Those are different from those of a courtroom, right?
Yes.
You are, I guess one big difference is you're not there to be an advocate for or against a particular witness. The format of a parliamentary committee is you've got a group of MPs who are asking questions and who might in the course of proceedings be persuaded to be more sympathetic to one witness or another witness. I think the time limits are different. You've taken on this role of being on a lot of different committees, prosecuting different scandals in government. How do you find the format and the method different from your previous life? What are the areas where it's sort of a seamless transition, and what are the areas where you've got to operate in a totally different way?
Yeah, another really good question, Garnet. And I often, when I'm asked that type of question, I have been asked that a number of times. As I say at the start, you can take the prosecutor out of the courtroom, but you can't take the prosecutor out of the politician. So all of those skills I have honed and developed for the better part of 30 years has allowed me, and I did, going into this, I didn't really realize how my skill set could easily be transferable in a parliamentary setting. But there has been challenges, and clearly the biggest challenge is obviously the time constraints that we have at committee. I remember my very first committee meeting was assigned to the Justice Committee after the election, Garnet, and not truly appreciating the time constraints or how many opportunities I would have for interventions. But going back to the old ways of a Crown attorney, where in a cross-examination, you're not time limited at all. Some of my best cross-examinations, Garnet, lasted several hours, if not several days. So I'll recap where things get cut off. Essentially, I said you could take the prosecutor out of the courtroom. You can't take the prosecutor out of the politician. Skill set very transferable. Challenges, however, in the political arena in terms of the time constraints. Literally, a 5-minute block, a 6-minute block, depending on the rotation, Garnet, as we well know. We might have one intervention through the entire 2-hour meeting. We might have a couple. So it's been a real challenge for me to take the best of the best approaches that I honed over 30 years in terms of developing a theory. Going into a cross-examination, you always have a theory. But the best part of a cross-examination as a prosecutor is not necessarily preparing verbatim what you anticipate the witness is going to say, but listening to what the witness has previously said in response to a number of questions. And I think you do that really, really effectively well, Garnet, in terms of positioning yourself quite often as the third member of our team or the fourth member of our team. And you often will start off one of your questions based on a response that the witness has given and extrapolate and expand upon that. So some of the best opportunities I have had is simply listening to the word of the witness and then taking from that and developing your overall strategy. So it's been a challenge. I'm getting much better from where I was 2.5 years ago to where I am right now. No difference in terms of the amount of material literally that you could read in advance of an actual appearance. We have the opportunity of reviewing previous transcripts. We have the opportunity of doing some more background research, getting more material from the government on the relationship that a witness may have. In this case, on the arrive scam issue, there's an abundance of material that we get from various departments. So I'm a ferocious reader. I read everything in advance. I have never gone into a committee hearing unprepared. Sometimes I'm over prepared. So I think it's always a reminder to me that although we do have these pre-con meetings and we have an overall strategy, things really, move on the fly. We get some great assistance from Craig as part of the OLO team, and it really depends on, again, what the witness has said as to how we're going to pivot in terms of changing the nature of our questions to really land some of the talking points that we think are appropriate. So it's listening skills, being adaptable, being nimble, and working together as a team to deliver that message. Very important.
just to drill down on the timing issue, because I don't have the background you have on. So when you're preparing for a cross examination in a courtroom, you don't have any limits on time that you're looking at. So you have that witness for as long as you have questions left to ask them.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I know one of the questions that we're going to have that we're going to talk about is some of the traits that I look at in terms of challenging the credibility of a witness.
Yeah.
It's far more effective to do that when you have unlimited time. Some of the best cross examinations I have done have lasted several hours and several days because a liar, a person who is less credible, can never keep the facts straight. And I will always, go at a particular issue in a number of directions. The witness doesn't think that I'm asking literally the same question because I'm simply rephrasing it. But
Right.
the judge knows where I'm going with this, and the judge is listening to a number of different responses to the very same question in essence. And that really is the telltale signs of someone who is less credible. Not so readily apparent in the political sphere in terms of getting that out, save and except we do have the transcripts. And
Yeah.
sometimes we have been very effective in terms of highlighting some of the contradictions. Some of our witnesses contradict more than others, and we well know who that person is,
Yeah.
Garnet. But you also have some very, very well rehearsed and very professional witnesses
Yeah.
who will also know how to game the system, to literally talk out the clock. In the case of ministers and other senior members of the bureaucracy, they know how committees tend to work, and they're there to frustrate our ability to really do our jobs effectively. So it has been a challenge, to say the least, but I think, together we work as a team, and I couldn't highlight the importance of preparation as a team and to read as much material that we do have available to us and to get that constant direction from leadership throughout the committee hearing
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
valuable.
I think like a big difference with that time constraint is you have to press the witness to give quick answers, and if you're looking for contradictions, generally it's going to be across a couple different appearances or across some of the different rounds of questioning. And so in a courtroom, I mean, you have you do it over a number of days. The witness would have breaks, I suppose, right, where they would,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But you're able to ask the same question multiple, and we've done some of that, I think, but it's much more constrained from a time perspective, and that creates a bit of an incentive sometimes for the witness, and certainly we've seen this with ministers in the government, where I think Melanie Jolie's line is always, well, first and foremost, let me tell you, I'll ask some very specific question, and she'll say, well, first and foremost, let me tell you about this other thing happening over here, right? And arguably, if we weren't subject to those time constraints, things might go faster in the sense that there's no incentive to rag the puck, right?
Not only that, a big difference between the two arenas, Garnet, is the lack of ability of a committee chair to mirror the opportunities and interventions that a particular judge would have dealing with a witness who refuses to answer the question, who will go off on different tangents. There was never an opportunity that I would not capitalize on if the witness was non-responsive to a straightforward question. I could always turn to the judge and say, Your Honor, would you please direct the witness to respond accordingly? We don't have that ability. We do to a certain degree, but it's not often as effective as it would be if a judge were compelling a witness to respond. And it really depends on who's chairing, right? If we have one of our own chairing, sometimes they tend to be a little more interventionist. If it's a government chair, forget it. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So I think for people listening, so they understand aspects of our system. So there are 4 parliamentary committees that in the standing orders have opposition chairs. One of them is the status of women. I don't know exactly sort of the history around how that became opposition chaired, but then there's also kind of the 3 principal, in some ways, I guess you might say accountability committees. Public Accounts Committee, Government Operations Committee, and the Ethics Committee. And these are committees that that you're often at, and that they deal with issues of government operations, accountability, value for money. They're different from the policy committees. Most of the committees of Parliament focus on a specific policy area, so finance, foreign affairs, public safety, etc. So when we have an opposition chair, that's a person who was elected as a Conservative who becomes the chair, and I think that's worked very well for those accountability committees because they do exercise what should be the powers of any chair to insist that questions are answered. I have increasingly been frustrated by government chairs who, for instance, if you have a minister being questioned, sometimes those government chairs will try to help the minister delay and avoid answering direct questions. So it's a different dynamic, and I think what people who are kind of just starting to follow some of these committees will see is the kinds of dynamics that can emerge in opposition chaired committees. But it's really the chair doing what all chairs should do, which is insist that witnesses answer questions and insist on the rights of members of Parliament to get answers within the time that's prescribed. Well, it's not just time to rag the puck, sure. Right?
That is so important, Garnet, because I'm sure you're hearing it as much as I'm hearing it. The whole theatrics behind question period. The average Canadian is extremely frustrated as to why there is never a direct response to a relevant question. And so I always came to believe, that is theater, and that's just part of the history of our democracy as to how it's been able to evolve. And there's very little opportunity for our current Speaker of the House to be interventionist, unlike the UK model. I happen to watch a little bit of that from time to time on CPAC on a weekend, and from time to time, that Speaker of the House in Britain is very interventionist and compels the government to respond accordingly. That was very refreshing to see that. But so if we can't get a question answered in QP, then at the very least, there should be some accountability and some direct responses to relevant questions at the committee level. So equally frustrating to Canadians who are watching this as well, that this is the same sort of pattern that is repeated.
Yeah, I think one of the points that was made around the Christian Firth testimony is sort of an interesting one, that we were very insistent on getting answers from a witness that was a contractor and involved in this government scandal. We don't have the same tools for holding ministers accountable. Ministers actually can't be compelled to appear before committee, and there's no evaluation of the quality of their responses in question period. Larry, one other area where I think the structure is probably different is the level of public scrutiny and the sort of both the media and the social media dimension. Did you have much experience dealing with media or sort of highly scrutinized trials in your previous career? And how do you think the fact that so many people are watching these conversations, so many more in Parliament, how does that change the work that you and the rest of us are doing?
Another excellent question. So I'll answer this because where things stood in the early 2000s and I can only speak to my community. I can't speak to any other
I find
legal
this
community
is
in
also
Canada,
interesting. I don't know why.
In my
Larry Brock
community,
is interesting to me.
there was a very robust daily media presence in our community. It was a newspaper that was widely subscribed to. This was before the explosion of the internet and media online. They were very robust. They were everywhere, and they took an active interest in following court cases. There was always a reporter. And they might have 2 or 3 court reporters because we'd have 2 or 3 courtrooms, of course. So yes, from time to time, particularly in the early 2000s, I'd be asked to give commentary about a particular case, win or lose, what my thoughts were. if there was going to be an appeal, what the prospects of success would be at an appeal, some of the challenges that I was facing during the trial itself. So there was accountability in terms of justifying the work that I did through the media to my community at large. That over time started to get less and less and less, to the point literally that I would actually have to call my local newspaper to say, oh, by the way, I've got a particular trial, or I got a sentencing, or someone is being sentenced. You might have an interest in coming by and reporting on. Often they would attend, sometimes they wouldn't. So it was frustrating for me as a prosecutor, because one of the sentencing principles for every single criminal offense in the criminal code is deterrence. And how do you share deterrence? How do you give a message to the community that if you commit a similar like crime, you might expect a similar like sentence? How can you do that if there's no media to report on it? Right? So that I found over and over was being diminished. The judges were talking about deterrence and how important it was to send a message to the community. But if you weren't in the courtroom itself, that message would be lost on you. So literally, that is still continuing to this day in my community, and I'm sure communities across the country. It's just not being reported enough. Unless you reach a higher threshold that the Toronto Sun may pick up on it, or some of the other television stations may pick up on it, but it's really a hit and miss type of approach. Whereas in politics, I think what we are doing, Garnet, in terms of our use of social media and some of our colleagues' use of social media, is we are not exclusively relying upon the traditional media to share the message as to what is happening in Parliament. They are unfairly, as you well know, reporting on activities in the House. Some media do a better job than others, but they're not being balanced, and they're not giving Canadians the full story. So where you and I differ, perhaps from some of our other colleagues who don't take more of an active interest in social media, is we are not only informing, we are educating, and we are providing, we're taking off that mysterious shield as to what's happening behind the political door, and giving Canadians the real deal. Sharing a particular exchange, a clip between yourself and a particular witness, allowing them to see at face value what is actually transpiring behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And although most of this is televised, it's another thing in terms of spreading that message across all platforms on social media.
Yeah, and one of the things that's struck me about the social media conversation on Arrive scam specifically is a lot of people's association with social media is that short clip, and of course we are sharing those clips for people that are scrolling through and looking for a quick piece of information. But there are also a lot of people that are watching full length hearings, so there's some YouTube channels out there. We were recently on Northern Perspective as one example,
Right.
and
Right.
I never would have thought this sort of thing would exist, where you have kind of long form playing of a parliamentary committee hearing with color commentary attached to it. People can go on the parliamentary website and watch these things. And I've often live streamed some of the key hearings on my page, and a lot of people they're not just coming for the clips. They're sitting and watching kind of in a long form way content that you're never going to find on a television channel. But there's been a lot of interest in the Arrive scam issue specifically. So maybe we're kind of coming out of the problem you talked about. There was a time when people would get their information more through traditional media. Then there's been maybe a bit of a dip in that. But now when people are interested in certain topics, they can go and watch kind of the whole thing unfold.
Right.
And will that impact the courtroom as well, do you think? I mean, people can... I think back historically. I mean, there were some instances. It was just in the news the death of O.J. Simpson. I mean, that was an instance where before the age of social media, people were really following the trial. I guess the new technology does provide more of an opportunity for people to follow these things as they unfold.
Yes, and there's been a great resistance in Canada to follow the U.S. model. A lot of their highly well publicized trials happening in the United States are in fact televised.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in Canada. So what we get is we have to rely upon the media to report, or people will actually have to go down to that particular courthouse and watch it live. So yeah, I see that bit of a disconnect between the two countries.
Yeah, and I guess people still sometimes make comments about, oh, the cameras in Parliament and how much of a difference that makes or not. The reality is people just wouldn't see or be aware of a lot of things that are happening otherwise. What are the sort of pros and cons on the courtroom side of more exposure? I guess the difference is, like, we need that exposure in Parliament because the primary accountability mechanism is an election, right? Whereas you mentioned the deterrent effect associated with awareness and coverage of a courtroom. That's interesting. But ultimately, it's not the public that makes the decision in the case in a courtroom. It's the judge that makes the decision. Whereas in Parliament, there's no quote unquote judge that's determining the outcomes in our proceedings. It's the judge. Yeah. The judge is the people that ultimately decide what they think of a government's performance.
Sure. How do I respond to that question? I think one of the pillars of our platform is to stop the crime.
Yeah.
So we know that crime has exploded exponentially across this country, literally since 2015. It's not abating at all. We have a broken bail system. We have police services from coast to coast to coast who are crying out for some meaningful change. The government put some lipstick on a pig with their bail reform bill, which I've been telling as many people as possible, as well as the government, that it is not going to address the stated objective, and the proof is in the pudding. We are still having a revolving door of criminals going in and out of the system because of policies and decisions made by the Supreme Court of Canada that have gone unchallenged by the current government. So to your point, we talk about a broken bail system, we talk about rising crime. People would benefit, in my view, if the press started reporting. And I know Toronto Sun does an excellent job of reporting of all these individuals who have been on bail, who have a track record of repeatedly being convicted of breaching court orders, who commit heinous crimes and then get re-released, commit further heinous crimes and then get re-released, on and on and on. It's one thing to actually read about it. People should be going down to their courthouses and seeing it live, because it's for every person who's being reported, garnet in the paper, there's probably another 100 facing similar circumstances happening every day in every criminal court across this country. People would be aghast to know how prevalent this problem really is. The media is not reporting on it. I do my best in terms of the work that I do in terms of exposing our broken criminal justice system and offering solutions that fall on deaf ears. But we have to educate the public because they are being impacted. They are suffering at the hands of criminals who just don't value human life anymore. I think about the mother, the young mother who just made the mistake of crossing the street at the wrong time at the wrong place, and she got hit by a stray bullet between two warring gang members in downtown Toronto in the middle of a day, middle of a work day. It could have been anyone, absolutely anyone walking that street at that time, and that is literally happening every single day. So the public needs to know, if the media is not going to report on it, that there's opportunities for them to experience this live. Anyone, anyone is free to go into a courtroom to watch the proceedings, whether it's bail court, whether it's trial court, whether it's guilty plea court, whether it's one of the specialized courts dealing with drugs or mental health or indigenous matters. The courthouse is a public place that is open for anyone to watch the proceedings.
Yeah, and related to that, I should say, of course, their parliamentary proceedings are televised, but people can also come in and actually watch parliamentary committees.
Yes.
We do have a lot of people that come to the visitors gallery in the House of Commons. Not a lot of people take advantage of the opportunity to come to the kind of viewing gallery during committees, but that's an available option as well.
That's right. Yes.
I want to ask one more question about kind of parallels between a court situation and a parliamentary committee situation. So in the context of a Arrive scam, we've dealt with this issue of people citing apparent health or mental health reasons for not wanting to appear and answer questions. Christian Firth did this very, very publicly, of course, in the House of Commons, and that was the kind of excuse used by the Liberals for saying we're not going to participate in asking these questions, even though the other parties did. That looked to me like the Liberals simply not wanting the accountability process to unfold. But it does, I think, raise important questions around how do you respect instances where there are legitimate and verified health or mental health claims, but also not allowing that to be kind of an excuse for not providing basic information. I'd imagine that there's a process for dealing with this on the court side. If you've got a murder trial, and the accused says asking me to testify is going to cause various challenges for me, push come to shove, you're still going to need to get that trial still needs to happen, right? So how do you navigate those situations, and what can we as parliamentarians learn from the way that prosecutors operate?
So the whole question, my whole response comes down to trying to separate truth from fiction. Judges, and I think committee chairs, should realize that there are cases, legitimate cases of medical reasons why a particular witness may suffer even further harm if they were compelled to testify. But there's also numerous examples where simply the evidence is such and the track record of a particular witness is such that they don't want to face any further scrutiny. So it comes down to determining what's legitimate and what is not. And I think the approach that we've adopted at committee has been respectful without challenging the legitimacy of the information that we received. We have received information from a particular doctor, but we've accepted the word of that doctor without any cross-examination as to whether the content is actually accurate. We don't know what type of relationship that particular witness had with that particular doctor. Did he go into a walk-in clinic and say, here's $50, I need a medical note to establish why my mental health is so impacted right now that I can't continue? So I think we've respected the authenticity of the complaint and offering solutions. And the solutions there were a number of ways that we could have modified the actual attendance of the witness. It didn't have to be in person. Quite often, these witnesses take advantage of our hybrid proceedings and they appear via Zoom. In the case of Mr. Firth, we provided him opportunity to have exchanges with his counsel, which doesn't always happen in a criminal context. We've given him the opportunity to have breaks. So I think we have modified and offered a structure without challenging the legitimacy of the original complaint. Now, you contrast that to a criminal proceeding, and I've encountered this numerous times. A judge, literally on his or her own, would not accept a simple letter at face value saying that this witness cannot attend without hearing directly from the medical practitioner, compelling the practitioner to attend, allowing both counsel an opportunity to examine and cross-examine to determine the legitimacy or authenticity of the complaint. Where it is verified, again, a courtroom offers alternatives. We don't have hybrid proceedings per se, but there's opportunities to testify in a different room. So you don't feel the pressure of people staring at you. We have the ability of having support people with witnesses to offer them comfort if it's going to be too challenging for them. So I think there's adaptability on both sides of the arenas, Garnet, but I think in the criminal context or law context, trial context, there is a mechanism to really determine the authenticity, which we don't have in Parliament.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we don't have those same mechanisms, and I think what you're saying is you have to listen, you have to be work to be accommodating, but it can't be just this binary of like, okay, either if there's no issues you come, or if there's some potential issue then you don't come at all, and the public never gets the information that they need. That there needs to be an exploration of that middle ground that says fundamentally we need this information, but we'll do it in as gracious a way as possible.
Correct.
Yeah. So Larry, it's been great chatting with you about kind of your background, about aspects of process. Just briefly in the time we have left, maybe I'll ask you a final question
Sure.
about the record of the government on scandal itself. And we don't really have time to go through all the details of the specific scandals. You and I have worked together a lot on Arrive scam. There's other issues that you've been involved in prosecuting as well. What's your sort of general take on the record of the government as it relates to scandal, the way they respond to these things, kind of what is behind what seems to be a significant breadth of scandal issues coming out of the government right now?
Two words: abysmal and hypocrisy. Abysmal in terms of the number and the breadth of the scandals, and the fact that none of it has toppled this particular government. Comparing that to other previous scandals of previous governments, clearly they have, come to their fate much, much sooner for far less. On the hypocrisy end of things, when Justin Trudeau, during the 2015 campaign, stared Canadians right in the eye and said, "You place your trust in me, you will see the most open, transparent, and accountable government this country has ever seen." And the scandals clearly, Garnet, speak for themselves. It's one thing on the Arrive scam issue alone. It's one thing for the Prime Minister and ministers and various PSs and backbenchers to stand up and say that those found to be crossing the line of criminality should be, held accountable, that the RCMP should be involved. We're not going to interfere with an RCMP investigation. That's all fine and dandy, but where is the ultimate responsibility of the Trudeau government? What happened to the concept of not only ministerial responsibility, and I think you've personally got some recollection of that, because I believe I missed an opportunity last week where you challenged Minister Anand on the whole concept of ministerial responsibility. And I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but her response was, well, I'm showing responsibility by being here at committee and answering questions,
Yeah, it
completely
was a
missing the
terrible response. You know,
terrible,
she's
absolutely
no
terrible.
understanding of the concept. Yeah.
No, because all those ministers involved in those three key ministries during the scandal in and of itself were asleep at the wheel. If they were asking questions, if they were being informed, as the deputy ministers claim that they were, why did they not put the brakes on this runaway train? There has been no responsibility. Where there's no responsibility, Garnet, there is no accountability. So when you have a prime minister who's been found guilty twice of ethical violations and ministers found guilty of ethical offenses, etc., you know, what does that say to the current government? What does it say to the Liberal Party? What does it say to Canadians? That we do not accept the final responsibility. We are not leading by example. We are not governing at the highest level of ethical competency. And that is really disturbing to me, not only as a parliamentarian, but as a Canadian, because we all expected so much more from this government. So it's been abysmal, an absolute abysmal track record.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about before, in a courtroom, you've got the judge sitting at the front who renders judgment, and in a democracy, it is the people of Canada who render judgment when the time comes. I know a lot of people in my riding are hoping for an election sooner rather than later, but this is the process. You are going into committees, prosecuting the government, prosecuting various contractors who had close relationships with the government, and the question sometimes I get back is, well, what's going to happen? What's going to be the consequence? What's going to be the follow up? And the ultimate answer to that is that it is the people who render judgment in an election. So you're prosecuting the case before the wider public is the judge, and that will be the time when a final decision is rendered.
Sure, judgment will come on election day, but I'm also hoping that the RCMP, who literally
Good
are
point.
receiving, the RCMP who are literally receiving referral after referral, initiating their own investigations. I've lost track probably as to how many ongoing investigations they're looking at with respect to this scandal alone, let alone the other scandals that are floating around Ottawa. But I'm hoping that they will essentially break down this concept that there is a two-tier level of justice in Canada. That if there is criminality and malfeasance on behalf of politicians, that they will not feel the political pressure as they did in my view, and I will stand by this with every breath that I take. I will stand by this. The political will was not there to charge Justin Trudeau on the SNC-Lavalin affair. There were reasonable and probable grounds to arrest him for obstruction of justice. I will always maintain that position regardless of what the commissioner and the deputy commissioner had to tell me at committee. So I'm hoping that Canadians can have faith again in our national police agency, that they will follow through, and where criminality has been found, regardless of the person, regardless of the title, regardless of their affiliation, that criminal charges will be laid.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. That there is the political side where we're prosecuting politically what government is doing, and the people render judgment in an election. But there's also the way that the information that comes out through our political prosecutions can identify areas where there's violation of criminal law, and then the traditional court system is engaged. And you're right, Canadians would expect that people, regardless of their position, their level, their background, are held accountable for criminal behavior.
Right.
Larry, anything else? Anything else I missed before we wrap up here? Anything?
No, you've been extremely thorough. As I say, I just thank you for the opportunity to share my background, my perspectives on the skill set that I bring to my role as a parliamentarian. I thoroughly enjoy working with you, Garnet. I've learned a lot from you, and we work very well as a team, and we will continue collectively to prosecute this government, to give Canadians the hope and belief that a conservative government led by the next great Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre, will start to correct the wrongs that this government this country is facing.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Larry, for being our guest today on Resuming Debate. I hope you've all enjoyed.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap that up. And again, Kirk has been with us the whole show. It's amazing. We're having a lot of new people come in the room, which is wonderful to see. I hope everybody comes back for tomorrow's show, because today's show makes me want to make tomorrow's show even better, find more. And I did find this little piece with Garnet and Brock pretty interesting. What did you think? Like, possibly you've seen it before. There's Kirk. He's waving. Sorry, Kirk. We're gonna fix you up. Can you hear me, Kirk? In real time? Not in real. You can speak. This is one of the tricks. So Kirk is watching with the time delay, and so he's getting a signal 20 seconds after I'm saying the words to him. He's going to start hearing this, and this is just a detail that my brother and I have to work out to try to improve the show. This is a couple more pieces with Poilievre, and we are wrapping up. Like, we'll come back with a bookend at that piece, and we do have two more short clips with Poilievre, just to send you out on a light note. Again, I'm not meaning to promote Poilievre so much as change. I figured change is necessary by now, and well, this is the way that I'm trying to make it happen, I guess. And here's a couple more pieces with Poilievre. People do like watching Poilievre, so we're going to drop right into that.
Mr. Poilievre, last week you had an exchange with the Prime Minister in the House of Commons where you referenced his departure from a private school he used to teach at. As you may know, there was lots of rumors about his exit, including what seems to be a completely defamatory story that has no credibility. Why did you raise that in the House of Commons?
Well, it is just a fact, and this Prime Minister has a track record of not completing what he starts and bragging about what he hasn't done. And that has spilled over into his policy positions, whether it's his promises to complete, for example, a Trans Mountain pipeline gone $27 billion over budget, still not done. Claiming he's going to have an electrification economy, bragging about all these mines that he announces but don't actually get completed. Brags about his policy and promises on climate change, but they never actually meet their targets. So with this Prime Minister, there's a lot of bragging about things he plans to do without actually getting them done.
You don't know
that story? That story, though. You referenced that particular story, which is...
No, I mentioned the fact that he did depart.
You said that he departed.
Yes.
And you couldn't remember why. So
that's right.
What did you mean by that?
Exactly what I said.
I don't understand.
Had you heard the story about him, the reason why he left the school?
You have to ask him why he left the school.
Well, let's remember Trudeau's personal ideological disposition on this. He's at a fundraiser about 7 years ago, and he was asked, what's your favorite kind of government in the world? He says, the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. And then everyone thought, well, this is just, the trust fund baby showing how shallow he is. I think he believed it. I actually think he believed what he said that day. And ever since we've seen evidence that that's the case, he gave the Beijing $250,000 Canadian tax dollars for the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which has a stated purpose to recreate the ancient Silk Route and give China hegemony across Eurasia and into the Middle East. He has refused to ban Huawei on our 5G network, even as you said, as our Five Eye allies have all done that. when we told him to close the border to COVID in, I think it was January or February of 2020, he said that was racist, of course. And a month later, he closed the border, so I guess he thinks he's racist. But he took a month, and during that time, 60,000 people came from China, including 2,000 from the Wuhan province. And then after all of that, and with 2 Canadian citizens being held hostage in that country, he then decides that the most important procurement that the federal government is going to make since buying arms for the Second World War, that is to say vaccines for COVID, that he would buy them from communist China. Of all the roughly 200 nations on planet Earth, that's the one he chooses to go to. And of course, 100 days went by, and you can imagine all these Chinese officials rolling around on the ground in the Politbureau, laughing their guts out at this buffoon in Canada who let them dupe him again. And they said, no, we're just kidding. CanSino was not giving you a vaccine. And of course, we were back of the bus with all the others. But like, what was going on in his brain at that point? They've got 2 hostages from Canada. They've sent us the virus in the first place. They have been nothing but hostile. And yet you're looking to buy your vaccines for the stuff that you're going to put into your citizens' veins. You're actually have our Canadian citizens put this stuff in their bodies, and you're going to trust the Chinese government and its state-owned enterprise to produce it. Something weird is going on about the relationship between Trudeau and China. I don't know what it is, and I won't speculate, but one would have to be breathtakingly dumb or worse to repeatedly make decisions at your nation's expense in favor of a hostile power the way he has done.
All right, guys. So we're back now, and I think we're maybe going to wrap up with Kirk. Are you there, Kirk? Again, we've got a time delay, and so that's one detail that we've got to work out here at Question Period Canada. My name's Ehren. This is Question Period Canada, and we have something fun to do related to Canadian federal politics every day. I'm trying to learn what is going on. While I learn, I'm trying to show that to you. So, again, I know the solution to the problem that Kirk and I have about the sound delay, because you've got to drop over to Facebook. And now he'll get that message in like 10 seconds, but you've got to go to your Facebook so that it's live. That's the thing, guys. We're working out the kinks. We saved this bogus for the end of the show. We're working some things out, trying to bring you the most entertaining show that we can, and I found today was a lot of fun. So again, we're not going to be able to get Kirk to help us this afternoon, but he's been helping. Sorry, we can't get him to help us wrap up the show. We're trying new things. We'll figure out how to do them. Ehren, Question Period Canada, like, subscribe, get notified, check out one of the other videos that we do, and tell somebody that we're doing this. I think that you'll come and enjoy the chat room. So that's it. We're going to wrap up. Have something healthy to eat today. Easy to stay warm in Nova Scotia. If you're in the rest of Canada, I'm not sure if it's easy yet. We're working on it. We'll catch you next video. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you all for watching. Catch you next video. Thank you, guys.